This is Brian Grubb, and I just wanted to go over a few things on transplanting seedlings in the event you ever need to do that. So these, I have zinnia and celosia here, and both of these will be grown for cut flowers. Usually when I sow seeds, I put 2 seeds per cavity, and then generally don't thin. Let 2 mature, and then I'll just plant them out into the garden that way. So you can see an example here, 2 seeds per cavity, and then occasionally you'll only get 1, which germinating, which is just kind of perfect. And so you're never going to get 100% germination, probably 90, the best you're going to get. And then when you do 2 seeds per cavity, you eventually may get some of these with 2 in them. Now, normally I would just plant this in the garden with 2 seedlings, but this year we are expanding our beds, and so I'm going to get a little bit greedy here and decide to transplant these into another container to utilize all of the plant material here. And so I just wanted to go kind of through that process, and just realize that first of all, you're never going to get 100% of the roots when you do this. You will lose some roots in the process. So the first thing I do is just take these containers out, or the plants out of the container, and as softly as I can sort of finesse some of that soil off of there to give me a little plantlet like this. In this case I had 3 here. So this is zinnia salmon rose. It's Bennery's salmon rose that we like to grow for cut flower. And again, I just, normally even with 3 seedlings in there, I might just plant that straight into the garden. So here's a couple of examples what these will look like. The other thing you can do, don't be afraid to, if you need to, you can actually trim these roots if for some reason they don't fit into the container. Now that's not a required step, but I just wanted to show that that is certainly a possibility to do if they don't fit in the container that you're going to transplant into. Again, just lightly. Something else, this material here, this stem tissue, this is called the hypocotyl, and you want to make sure not to crush that, because that will kill the plant if you crush that too hard. So you could handle these just by the leaf, and in the event the leaf broke off, that'll be fine. Through the handling process you can replace, well, that eventually that leaf will replace itself, but this hypocotyl region is very sensitive. The tissues below those 2 cotyledons there, if you crush that stem, there's no way for the plant to recover. You can see I extremely cut that one, not paying really good attention there. Okay, and then the other thing I'll do, in this case these seedlings have only been in the pot about 3 weeks since germination, and so this soil, in my opinion, is still relatively clean and fresh. I will remove any just extraneous root debris out of there. So then I'm left with 2 in there, with 1 plant per cell. What I'm going to do, so one of the terms is called J-rooting. If you kind of put this in and you flip the roots up, that's an undesirable, and that's why sometimes roots will be pruned. And so what I like to do is just lightly hold this and then do a little bit of backfill. So I'm putting these back into the exact same container, which for my purposes is completely sufficient, and just let them grow for another 2 weeks in this container. You could actually pot these into a little bit of a larger container as well if you wanted. And just putting these into an empty, completely empty cell, and then just gently and loosely backfilling some soil in there, taking care not to J-root those as I go through. And then when I get to the end, I've used up all my soil essentially here, And then I'll do just a really light tamp on these to kind of settle in the roots. And, you know, a little bit more backfill here. And just settle those in. And that's really all you need to do. Now the next important step is to water these in quickly, and then relatively quickly. You don't want to stress them. And create a new label, put the old label back in, and then create a new label. We'll get these little guys watered in here. And then you just want to acclimate them for maybe 12 to 24 hours, which means you don't want them in a real bright light condition. You'll want them to just sort of rest and acclimate after that transplanting step. And so we'll put them into a seedling flat like this, or to show them here now after being watered. But again, don't want to have a lot of bright light on these after the transplanting process. Want to keep low light on them to let them acclimate to that transplanting process. And then within about 24 hours, these could be brought back into a full light or full sun condition. I'll go ahead and do those last 4 quickly. I'll need some extra soil in order to do that. Scraper here. I like to have a scraper on the table. In this case, I'm just using a ruler to move that soil quickly. And then the same process here. I have 5 seedlings left. And in this case, I'll use more or less the fresh soil. This one has left the entire root system on there, and you can see I start to bend that if I put it into the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to just trim some of those off. With annuals, this is less of a problem with the J rooting than it is with woody plants, but nonetheless, it's still a consideration to take. Get these guys back in, get them watered. And so I just went from 6 plants to 11 plants that I can effectively put out into the garden. So we're going to appreciate that. And the spacing on these, I can space out 10, 12 inches depending on what the requirements are in the garden for these particular plants, and try to maximize yield and productivity of each of these individual plants instead of like I've done in the past, just planting doubles in that plug. And that works fine too. It's just that in this case we do have some bigger spaces to fill this year, and I just thought I would maximize the yield on this germination and account for all these seedlings in here instead of planting doubles. So that's the basic process. I just went through the zinnia. I'll do these celosia next, and these are both for cut flowers. I'll water these in, keep them kind of in an acclimated phase for the rest of today, the rest of the 24 hours, and then I'll be able to expose them. Maybe not to full sunlight or full, definitely full grow light condition tomorrow will be fine, but I wouldn't want to put these out in full sunlight. Probably if I was moving these outdoors, I would acclimate them outdoors into a shady environment and then gradually into the sun. But these will stay indoors for another, probably another 2 weeks and fill out, and then they'll be ready to plant outdoors in and around Mother's Day. Okay, so that's the transplanting process that I do and follow that practice, and then I've almost doubled the amount of plants here that I'll have to put out in the garden through doing that with a limited amount of effort. The nice thing about having them in the plugs, just on this last thing here, is that if I don't get to the transplanting phase like I'm doing here, they can be just put directly into the garden or thinned at some point. So I do still like using this 6-pack tray, even though I'm doing a little bit of transplanting here. Okay, and with that, I appreciate you watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.